Amen. You may be seated, Story Church. Thank you so much. Most of you have been around long enough, and you know that my name's Troy, and that's my wife, Sarah, and we are both the co-lead pastors here at Story Church. But we do want you to know that if today is your first time, you are a VIP. You should have had a connection card in your seat. Hopefully you got a VIP booklet when you came in. Just throughout the service, sometime today, if you will, just fill out as much information as you feel comfortable with. And then at the end, if you will, turn that in on the way out in the lobby. There's a VIP table out there with some T-shirts and some different stuff out there for you to collect. And so most of you know that I'm a very competitive person. And most of the times, I'm not going to do anything unless I can win. I mean, I've quit sports before because I couldn't win, so I was just going to shut it down. Okay, so what's even more fun, cooler, funner, is when you win a competition that you didn't even know you were competing in. And so this week, and actually for the whole entire year of 2013, you were in a competition that you did not realize you were a part of. And so Sarah and I, were invited to come to the Chamber of Commerce annual banquet this past week. They asked us to come pray, which, you know, we get to do that. That's awesome. We love being a part of our city and being able to do that. And most of you know that one of our greatest prayers has always been that Story Church would impact the city and impact the community in some way. And so we got to go and we got to pray and we got to sit around with all these really intelligent, smart people. And, I mean, y'all know me, you know, and I had to dress up. I even tucked my shirt in, you know, to kind of look nice. And so totally surprised. We're up there, and they're giving away awards for outstanding business and outstanding this and outstanding that. And then the president of the chamber stands up, and she says, we have an award for an organization that has impacted our community. They have served, they've made a difference in people's lives, they've made a difference in everything that they've done. And Story Church, you received an award of the President's Choice. And so that's something to be excited about because we didn't know. I mean, we didn't know that we were competing. But as we went up and she gave us, you know, she shared a little speech with us and stuff, and she shared with everyone that we had been impacting people. And so I don't know where you grew up, I don't know how you grew up, but I know this, it's 2014. And with so much negativity around the church and so much things going on to where they're saying that the church has no influence, has no impact, that Jesus is just kind of a bygone, I want you to know that you're making a difference. Those of you that partner with Story Church, the tithes and the offerings that you give, the times that we go out and serve, the Christmas presents that you buy and give away, you're making a difference. And what's cool is, yes, you know, God recognizes that. And that's why we do what we do. But Matthew 5:13-16, Jesus said, let your good works show so that other people will see God. And so everything that you've been doing is making a difference. And we're impacting our community. And hey, that's what it's about. And so you ought to be excited if you came today and you're a little down and you don't know what's next. That 2014, guess what? We got it once. So you realize now we got to do it again. I mean, because you can't just, we can't be no one-hit wonder. I mean, so we got all kinds of stuff going on this year, and so it's going to be exciting. You see here, I have some candles. Today we're in week 3 in our The End series. You should have had some message notes when you came in. If you don't feel like writing and you have a smartphone, you can open up the YouVersion app and you can follow along on there. But today we're going to look at pain. Everyone say pain. Pain can be a good thing and pain can be a bad thing. But when it comes to endings, sometimes we put up with more pain than we should. I don't know about you, but I have had to have teeth taken out before. I had 5 wisdom teeth. I'm not going to brag, but that is what it is. And so they had to take one out. And it was starting to hurt a little bit, and so that's a bad pain. But now when they pulled it out, that was a good pain because now there's no more pain. And so sometimes we go through those adventures, and there's that bad pain, but then there's that good pain. H.W. Longfellow says this, and we've said it every week. He says, great is the art of the beginning, but greater is the art of ending. And so week one, we looked at pruning, and we looked at kind of those things that we need to prune out of our lives, and we looked at the rows. And then last week, we looked at seasons and how all of our lives have seasons. And we go through things, and we need to prepare for the next season while we're in the season we're in. And we don't need to expend everything that we have in the current season, because there will be another season. And so as we move forward and as we continue to look at endings, today we want to look at the pain of the endings. Because let's face it, if you've ever had to end a relationship, if you've ever had to leave a job, I don't care if you're going to a better job and your company supports you and everyone's behind you, there's still some pain there. Because you're leaving relationships. You're leaving behind, those good memories. You're leaving behind those good times. Now, sometimes you're leaving behind a lot of bad, too. But there's still some pain because sometimes there's those relationships, you're connected with those people, you've done life with them. And so I wanted to kind of set up some candles because when you're a little kid, hopefully your parents taught you to not play with fire. Because fire burns. Also, somehow fire will make you wet the bed. I never figured that one out. But my parents used to tell me if I played with fire, I'd wet the bed. And so that I need to Google that and see if that's really a fact. But if you haven't used that one on your kids, go right ahead. I don't know if it's right or not, but it may scare the pee out of them. But never mind, you don't do that. So never mind. So don't do that. But I was always told that. And so, but what I recognize is that, and we've got Noah, and he's 7, and then Sarah went and bought these little wall plug type deals where you melt things while they're plugged into your wall. I'm not sure how I feel about that because I didn't think you were supposed to mix liquid with electricity, but somehow they invented it, and so now we do that. And so, but all the time we have little kids come over, and what do they want to do? They want to go over there and put their finger in it. But we're 2014. We're much more careful now. We're more safe. So we don't want to let them do that because we know that's going to hurt them because we felt that pain before, and we don't want to feel that pain, and we don't want them to feel that pain. And so we try to protect them. And that's a good thing because you don't want your child to get burned. You don't want to go through those things. And so there are certain preventive measures that we take to prevent ourselves from pain. But sometimes we get into relationships and we get into situations, we don't protect ourselves from that. We start tolerating it. And so I was kind of looking around and believe it or not, and maybe you know this, maybe you don't, but when elephants are real small, the trainer will actually tie up an elephant to a metal peg, put it in the ground, and then tie a chain around his leg to that peg. And so when they're baby elephants, they really can't do anything about that. They try and they pull and they pull and they can't get away from it. And eventually, after so long, the elephant actually cuts its leg. And so much so that eventually it stops pulling. Now, if you've got a weak stomach, I may have just wigged you out. Like that little cake is coming back up that you just ate in the hallway. It's okay. We're about done with the illustration. But he keeps pulling, and finally he says, I quit. I'm not going to try to get away because the pain is just too much for him to take. And sometimes we get into those situations where we've tried and we've tried and we've tried, and finally the pain is it's too much. We don't want to put up with it anymore. So we make it the new normal. So much so that it's been scientifically proven that our minds begin making roadmaps of painful experiences. And if we go through them so many times, our mind actually will say, hey, this is normal, go this way. I grew up, my parents, they divorced when I was young, but I used to hear stories about my grandfather and some things that he did and some other family members, and sometimes they had some physical abuse problems and some emotional abuse problems, some word abuse problems. And so I always wondered why. And maybe you have that person in your life. Maybe you've got that person and you've talked with them and you've prayed with them and you've done everything but throw the Bible at them, but they just continue to go back to the same situation over and over and over. And you beat your head and you wonder why, and I'm about to kind of break it down to you because the reason why is because we get these roadmaps in our head. And we say this is normal. Say this is acceptable. Because we don't want to face the pain of removing ourselves from that situation. And so there's actually three words when it comes to pain and when it comes to us tolerating situations that we look at, and they're in your notes, and you can jot them down. They'll be on the screen. One is personalized. That's when we personalize the pain. We say, you know what, I am a bad, you put in your title of whatever you are. You know, maybe you're a stay-at-home mom, and your kids, they're hyper because they're kids. That's what kids do. But you can't get them to mind. You know, you want to take them out and beat them, but you don't want to be that parent either. And so you run around the house and you say, I'm just a bad mom. Or maybe you're that dad and you're working hard and you're trying to do everything you can do to provide for your family, but sometimes you feel like you just can't be there enough. And you sit down and you look in the mirror and you say, I'm just a bad dad. Whatever it is that you do, whether it's working at a warehouse, whether it's working at a school, whether it's working at a bank, you get in these situations and you personalize it because you make a mistake. And if you're anything like me, usually when I make a mistake, it's followed by like 20. And so it's like it just piles on. Like, well, I did this bad, and then this, and then this. And we start personalizing it. We say, well, I'm just a bad whatever. Our next one is we make them pervasive. We say, you know what, I'm not just a bad fill in the blank, I'm bad at everything. You know, my kids won't act right, they won't eat their dinner, I'm a bad mom, I guess I'm just a bad wife, I'm probably a bad friend. And we just start throwing them out there and making all these negative statements. We get into what one researcher called this kind of loneliness. We get there and we just say, you know what, I'm just bad at everything. I can't do anything right. And a matter of fact, the actual term for it is learned helplessness. We learn this helplessness and where we say, you know what, all is bad. I can't do anything right. And then last but not least, the next one is we say this is permanent. We say it's never going to get any better. You know, I don't know about you, but in our house, we've kind of taken out that never word because you can tell God that you're never going to do something, and then you'll be doing it. You can tell God you're never going to be a pastor, which I wouldn't encourage you to do, because then one day you'll be doing it. And so we make but then on the bad side, we make it, well, I'm never going to get any better. You know, I've been a bad wife, I've been a bad child, I'm never going to be any better. And we start making these things permanent, and then it really starts messing with our mind. Because we start creating these maps, and we start saying, well, this is who I am, this is what I am. And what happens is, and you've heard me share it before, we get these things that happen in front of us, and they're situations, and they're bad, and then we can't see past them because it's right here in front of us. But if we'll back out and look at a 30,000-foot perspective and say, you know what, I messed up here, but overall, I'm operating okay. You know, I may not be perfect, I've got my issues, I'm working on stuff, but I'm okay. And so what I want us to do today is kind of unpack this a little bit. And before we leave today, I'm actually going to go through how we can retrain our minds. Because everything begins in the mind. You know, if you don't believe me, go through the week, something bad happens, all of a sudden you hear this voice. Strangely enough, it sounds like your voice. And it says, well, you messed this up. You're bad this. You treated your friend wrong, so now you're not a good friend. You treated your boss wrong, so now you're not a good worker. If you're a follower of Christ and you do something wrong, oh, now you're just not a good Christian. Maybe you're not even a follower of Christ. Maybe you're just a big liar. If you've ever heard those thoughts, those are pain moments coming in and trying to retrain your mind. Everyone say pain. So there's this thing that I kind of found, and I thought it was kind of cool because I know that sometimes we can get in this all is bad moment. You know, everything's bad. You know, tomorrow's Monday, so Monday's awful. You know, the whole week is just burnt. I'm ready to get to Friday, and we kind of wish away our life. And so if you're taking notes, and maybe you are taking notes so you can't do it right now, you can jot down a note. When you get home, I want you to get out a piece of paper. This is homework. You don't have to turn it in, but it's homework. And make 2 columns. And on the left column, I want you to write down all the things that you worry about that you have no control over. And then on the right side, I want you to make another column, and I want you to write down all the things that you can do something about. Because let's face it, there's some things there's nothing we can do about it. I'm bald, there's nothing to do about it. I'm sure I can get some Miracle Grow and those little cheetah pets, try that, but I'm not going to do that, so there's nothing to do about that. Okay, so you're already going to worry about the things that you can't do anything about, but we all know that worry is wrong. Worry's not good. We should not worry. But since you're going to do it anyways, get up in the morning, make your list, and for 10 whole minutes, worry about all those things that you can do nothing about. And just get it over with, worry about it, stomp, snort, spit, do whatever you got to do, walk it back and forth. Hopefully you've got clothes on, but just do it. Just get it all out. And then 10 minutes, shut it down. Because there's nothing you can do about it. It'll be back Tuesday. You can come back tomorrow, look at your list again. Now the rest of the day, your next 23 hours and 50 minutes, spend time working on things that you can do something about. Your boss, he may be one, and you don't want to work for him anymore. But the fact is that you haven't turned in your 2-week notice yet, so you still got to work. So since you can't do anything about him, you can do something about you. And what I've learned is that it's our attitude in the moments of, well, I can't, I want, I'll never. It's our attitude in those moments that determine what our attitude will be in the next season. Because we learned last week, there's another season coming. So wherever season you are, whatever you're doing, whatever you're having to put up with, whatever you can't control, worry about it tomorrow, 10 minutes, and then shut it down. And so, all right, for the rest of the day, this is what I'm going to worry about. Maybe you are married to a spouse, and they've got issues, and they're not a good spouse, and you try everything you can do, but they're just not getting it. Hey, for 10 minutes, don't nag them, because that's not going to make anything better. But for 10 minutes, while they're not around, go into the closet and just nag them to death. And then for the rest of the day, love on them, serve them, meet their needs. Do what you can do to make their life better. Hey, just try it out. You never know. So, because if not, you're going to keep nagging, and we all know that you keep doing that, it doesn't go anywhere. And so don't worry about the things that you can't do anything about. It creates maps in our minds, and it shuts us down. So why do we do this? Why do we create these maps? Why do we go through life? Because let's face it, some of it started from childhood. Some of us went through some things as children, and now it's affecting us as adults. I've met people and counseled with people in their 50s and 60s and 70s, and something happened to them when they were little, 9, 10, 11 years old, and still today they haven't gotten over that. And I'm here to tell you, maybe you went through something bad, and it wasn't fair, and it wasn't right. It's not your fault. There's nothing you could do about that. But moving forward, there is something you can do about it. It's all about retraining our minds. So number one, if you're taking notes, why do we do this? Why do we create these maps? We have an abnormal high pain threshold. We put up with a lot. And let's face it, if you grew up in the church, you grew up, learning all of these things, hey, turn the other cheek, be graceful, be all of these things that, let's face it, the guy that was speaking to you on Monday, he was yelling at somebody. He wasn't turning the other cheek. He wasn't doing that. Some of us have grown up in situations where we've had unrealistic expectations put on us. And so maybe you're growing up. I remember this one time I was riding my bicycle, because that's what I did. I can ride a bicycle and skate. That's about all I can do. Those things I win, everything else I quit. And so I was riding my bicycle, and I was going to go make this awesome jump in a ditch, because we're from Alabama. We didn't have ramps. And so they didn't have those yet. We had to create our own. Get a piece of plywood, a couple of bricks. That always ends in great fun. So I'm going, and I decided to run down in this ditch to do a jump, because I think it's worked before, so I'm going to try it again. And so I hit the ditch, and for whatever reason, the little round wheel just stopped. And I went flying over the handlebars. And luckily for me, there was a gravel driveway there, so I just slid right across it. And so I was all graveled up and jacked up and everything. And so, of course, I did what any little 9, 10-year-old would do. I went running to my daddy. I was crying, screaming. And I remember what he said to me. I'm 33 years old, and I still remember it like it was yesterday. He said, "Go away and leave me alone. You're okay." Now, some of you may have experienced that. I want you to know that 2 years ago, I really struggled with praying. I didn't pray regularly. I didn't pray a lot. You know, Sarah had been the spiritual wife and been encouraging me in a non-nagging way for many years to pray, because I couldn't do it. So I read this book, and through that book and just through some freedom, I realized that because of that moment, when I was 10 years old, I didn't want to go to God because I didn't want to bother Him. So maybe you've been in that situation. Maybe you've been told, "Hey, that doesn't hurt. You don't feel that." I know I'm guilty of it. Noah start crying. "Hey, suck it up. You're not hurt. Nothing's broke." I used to have this coach tell us that when he would break something, they would just go over on the sideline and fix it with duct tape and put them back in. And of course, some people believe that, and so they'd play hurt. But we have this unnormal high pain threshold. And hey, it's okay to feel pain. Pain shows us that something's wrong. Pain shows us that, hey, that tooth is not getting any better. You need to go jerk that bad boy out. Pain shows us that something needs to change. Number 2, why do we create these maps? We cover for others. Some of us, maybe you were the older sibling, and so you knew that things had to get done, and you knew that your brother and sister wasn't going to do it, so you knew you had to cover for them. Or maybe you grew up in a home where your parent wasn't that reliable, but you knew that things still had to get done. And so you made sure they got done. It didn't matter what it took. And I'm not saying that those aren't bad things, you know, to cover for somebody, to help somebody out. But when we enable someone, when we create this culture of where, you know what, I'm going to do whatever it takes, sometimes we end up being taken advantage of. And there's a healthy balance there. But sometimes we cover for others so much to our detriment. And so sometimes we create those maps in our minds when we're doing that. Number 3, believing that ending means I have failed. Now, guys, I know this is tough for us because we don't like to quit anything. You know, Vince Lombardi, he said, hey, winners never quit and quitters never. Oh, come on now. Winners never quit and quitters never. And so that's all great and fine in the sport of football, when they're trying to play for a trophy that next year we're going to forget who won anyways. But in life, sometimes it's okay to quit. Sometimes it's okay to say, hey, we need to end this today. But we get caught up in this, hey, I can't quit, I don't want to look like a failure. Someone told me a long time ago in this church planning process when we started, he came to me, he said, I want you to know that if God has asked you to do this and you said yes, you're already successful. It doesn't matter what happens, you're already successful. And so wherever you are, whatever spot in the journey that you're on, if God asks you to do something and you say yes, you're already successful. Now that doesn't mean in 3 months that God doesn't say, hey, it's time to shut that down. Because sometimes God will tell us, hey, it's time to end it. It's time to move on. It's time for the next season. And so we have to be okay with quitting. Quitting does not mean you're a failure. Once again, 30,000-foot perspective. Just because I quit this one thing, it does not define me. We have to remap our minds. Number 4, misunderstood loyalty. You know, sometimes we get into relationships. I mean, let's face it, we've talked about it the past 3 weeks. We don't like confrontation. You know, Sarah and I were talking last night, and we were talking about, because, you know that one person that you're thinking in your mind right now that they do like confrontation? You're thinking, do I meet that guy on Monday? He loves it. The problem with people that love confrontation is they never get anyone to be confronted with because everyone knows to avoid them. And so they're just kind of weird and sick and all out there on their own. But most of us, we don't like confrontation. So we will get into relationships and we will hang out with people and we will do life with people, and we have this misunderstood loyalty. We think, if I do this, it's going to hurt you, so I don't need to do that. And there's a big difference between I need to do this for me and I'm doing this to you. Because if you're doing something for you, that does not mean you're doing something to someone else. Now, that may be a side effect. That may be a cause. That may be an effect. That may happen. But just because you're choosing to do something that God has asked you to do, you're choosing to go in the right direction, that doesn't mean everyone's going to be okay with it and fine with it and perfect with it. There's going to be those people that don't like it. I was sharing my story a little bit the other day, and I shared how when I came home from my first church service, I was 21 years old. I came home and I cleared out everything that I had, anything that resembled anything from my old life. I just threw it all away. And all of my friends left too. Now, I could have said, you know what, I've got to keep my friends around. I've got to be a good friend to them, so I can't do any of this. And I can guarantee you I would not be where I am today. There are relationships that sometimes we have to allow to end. But we get stuck in this misunderstood loyalty and we think, well, we're a good friend. They've been through this with me. We've done life. It's a season. Sometimes those seasons need to end. And then the fifth one, the last one, we just allow people to become codependent. And I'm not saying that there's not people that don't need our help. You know, there are sometimes issues that come up and arrive in life that sometimes they need us and we need to be there for them. But there's a big difference in someone having a disability, some kind of illness, something like that we need to be there, and just allowing someone to still live off of us and mooch off of us. I mean, let's just be real. You know, if you've got that 28-year-old kid that's still living at home and they're still playing video games, hey, you need to boot them out. I mean, I'm just being real. And hey, if they got a problem with that, send them to my house. We can talk about it. Because they're 28 years old. It's time to grow up. But we're in a culture to where, you know, and we see it statistically. Kids are leaving home later. And let me be real with you. It's because when they were 10 years old, they needed to be cleaning their own room. They didn't need mom and daddy coming behind them and making their bed and folding their clothes. Look, I know Noah is 7. And look, I know I've just got a 7-year-old. I know some of you have grown children. In 5 years, you're going to come back and say, yeah, I remember that one message. You're wrong now. Hey, I'm cool with that. But right now, I got a 7-year-old, so that's where I am. But I know this. We make him fold his own clothes. Now, it may not look the best. And there may be creases and wrinkles, but hey, he's learning. He's got to learn. You got to crawl before you walk. You know, we talked about there's seasons in life. One day, hopefully, he'll be OCD like me and he won't have any wrinkles on his shirt. But right now, this kind of is what it is. You know, we've got him folding towels now. And there's a certain way I like my towels folded. Okay? I'm just being real, just being transparent. And he doesn't fold them right. But that's okay. Let him fold them. Eventually, he'll get it right. And so there's things that we have to let go of. There's things that maybe you've got that person in your life, and you know when they call, you hit ignore because you know they're going to ask for something. And it's not that they're calling to ask for something and they're really in need and you're really feeling generous. It's because they know they can come to you and you're going to take care of it. And that's tough. That's a tough conversation to have. That's a tough conversation to look at an adult and say, you're an adult. It's time for you to take care of yourself. That's hard. And I'm not saying we don't help people. I'm not saying we don't minister to people in our family and those things. But we've got to be able to tell the difference. And there's this thing called, and it's your next blanks there, it's called conflict-free aggression. Conflict-free. Because what I want us to do is I want us to get remapped in our mind that we can have conflict-free aggression. Now, I'm not talking about aggression like UFC, let him break his leg because he kicked somebody else. I'm talking about, hey, you know what? I need to sit back and be able to focus on this so I can really get a good perspective. Conflict-free kind of gives you the ability to do these things. Sense what is really going on around you and think logically. How many of you would like to do that? To be able to sit back and look at a situation and say, okay, let me really look at this for what it is. Let me think logically through this. And let me see what the next steps are that need to be done. Because sometimes when we're remapping our mind and we're getting stuck in these seasons and we're getting stuck with not ending things, we don't like any conflict. And we automatically tie a confrontation, a discussion, a talk to conflict, so we shut it down. And so we're not able to think clearly. We're not able to clearly observe things. Something else it does, it helps us think abstractly. It actually helps us exercise good judgment. You wonder, well, they always call, and you're probably chewing your spouse out because they keep calling you, and it's your spouse's fault somehow, but somebody's got to hear it. And then they call, and you just keep recycling it. And it's time to have that discussion. So how do we do that? How do we do that? Because that's like a lot of bad stuff topped on top of bad stuff, and we all got these mind problems, and so how do we fix that? And there's really one way, and there's this guy in the Bible named Paul that actually talked about this. He said there is a way to overcome all of these things. Romans 12, 1 and 2, it'll be on the screen if you don't have your Bibles. He says this is how you can change your internal mapping. He said if you want to reconstruct the road maps that you've developed, this is how you do it. So here's what I want you to do, God helping you. Take your everyday, ordinary life, your sleeping, eating, going to work, and walking around life, everything you do, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing you can do for Him. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture. Don't become so, I can't have this conversation. I can't have this discussion. I can't have this talk. I can't face this. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. You'll be changed from the inside out. I know for me, when I started going to church, there was so many things that I wanted to do on the outside to fix it. I wanted to fix all of these things, and so I started wearing different clothes. I started, listening to different music, and I started using different language, and none of those things are bad, but all of those things are external. We have to get to where we can change our internal, and it all starts with our mind. The first thing that we can do, probably the easiest thing, but we very rarely do it, is ask God for wisdom. It all starts with asking Him for wisdom. James 1:5 says this. He says, if any of you lack wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. All we have to do is ask Him for wisdom. And sometimes that's tough. And sometimes that means asking someone else, hey, you've been through this situation, let me ask you. I have several pastors that I call on a regular basis. They've been doing this a long time. And I call them, hey, I've got this situation, what would you do? Ask wisdom. And here's the deal. God puts people in your life that you can glean wisdom from. As a parent of a 7-year-old, we have some couples in our life that we call and say, hey, we know that you have a 15, 16, 17-year-old right now. What can we do now to get them there? And so ask that wisdom. The second thing that we can do, and it's probably the toughest after asking for wisdom, is face reality. Sometimes you ask for wisdom, and then the reality is that you have to do something different. You've got that kid that keeps climbing in your bed every night. Mom, you got to shut that down because they're 4. They don't need to be in your bed anymore. Just saying. The reality of that is you may have to change something in what you're doing. You ask God for, hey, my marriage is not going that well. What can I do? And then someone tells you, hey, you need to do these things. You need to start praying for your spouse. You need to start serving it. You need to stop going out and doing all this stuff. The reality is that now you have to change something. You have to change a behavior. You have to change the way you speak. You have to change the way you think. And so we have to face that reality. Paul said this. He says, if we get this straight now, we won't have to be straightened out later. If we can get it right now. You know, and I keep talking about, as we're raising Noah, we're thinking about things right now. Okay, right now, what are some things that we can be doing so that when he is 14, we don't have to straighten out something? And I think we live in that day and age to where we are starting to see effects of the way people have been raised. We're starting to see effects of the way people have been treated, the way they've done this job, the way they've done this and that. And so now we kind of live in this time continuum of say, okay, if I do this, this will kind of be my end result. The problem is that we get into this state of mind of not retraining our mind and we don't face reality. And so we've got to be able to face that reality and say, hey, if I don't straighten it out now, I'm going to have to straighten it out later. And you know and I know it gets more difficult the longer it happens. It's going to be more difficult for us to retrain our mind the longer we've been thinking away. And so we have to begin retraining it. Number 3, and this is kind of how we know what we need to do, is we need to know that endings are good. If we can begin to embrace that as normal, say, you know what, endings are good, endings are okay. There's not this pain like the elephant that's trying to pull away. There's not this pain that's associated with that. Because what I didn't share with you is this, that elephant, when they're little, they do that. Okay, elephants grow to be these huge, massive monsters of an animal. When their trainer comes out to them, they bring out this little piece of rope, and they tie it around the elephant's leg. And then they go over and they tie it to this little wooden peg. That elephant will not move. That elephant will not pull on that rope because as a child, it remembers there was pain. So as an adult, it's not going to do it. And that's what we do as humans. Maybe we had this pain that happened. And we don't want to face that pain again. We don't want to feel what that felt like anymore. And so we refuse to do it. We say, you know what? I'm just going to stand here. Because if I move, it's going to hurt. I mean, let's face it, we play with fire and we realize that if I touch this, it's going to burn. It's going to hurt me. So I'm not going to do that. The problem is that sometimes we have things happen to us that they're not right, they're not fair, they're not good for us. And we associate those things with pain, and so we don't want to fight that. And we allow those things to continue to happen. We've got to realize that endings are good. Endings are okay. It's okay to end those things that are not good for us. It's okay to shut those down and move forward. It's okay to know that, hey, if I end this, it may hurt someone else. But if it's hurting me, it's not good anyways. And that can be a very difficult call to make. Ecclesiastes 3:1, Solomon wrote, there is a time for everything. There is a time for everything. There's a time to end things. There's a time to shut things down. There's a time to examine those things and say, these things are no longer good for me. Maybe you had something happen when you were a child. Maybe when you were a teenager. Maybe you did something and you still are living with the results of that, but only in your mind. You allow those things to control you. You allow those things to control what you speak about yourself. You know, you go around the house and you're doing okay, but mentally you're going back and you're saying, well, I'm not a good this. I'm not a good that. You know, most of you have heard me share before, you know, when I took my first speech class, my only speech class in college, they told me to never get up in front of people and speak again. They said it was that bad. I mean, he told me, he said, I'm going to pass you on this one deal. You don't come back. He did. He told me it was that bad. I had a theater teacher. She hated my guts. because we would do our run-throughs. And you've heard me, sometimes I just start talking and it all runs together. Well, we're doing that for a production, doing that for a play, and she could not stand it. Alliteration. I had never heard of alliteration, but I learned in 5 years what alliteration is. And I learned that a good old boy from Alabama cannot alliterate much. But all of these things, and granted, now I'm 33, and so I can look back on that and I can say, those are 2 moments where Satan was trying to shut something down that God was trying to birth. And hey, I wasn't even a believer yet. I didn't know anything. I didn't know Jesus from you. And so regardless of where you are on the journey, God can be working something in you right now that you have no idea what's coming next. But what we have to be able to do is recognize things that need to end and shut them down and allow those things to pass. Allow those seasons to end and prepare for the next season. Because no, I never went to another speech class because I was passed, and I mean, let's face it, I was going to school to pass, not to learn anything. I just wanted to get the little piece of paper. But what I did continue to do is I continued to read to myself. I continued to speak out loud to myself. Because I did not want to be defined by what someone else had said. And so maybe that's you today. Maybe someone spoke something over you 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. And you're still living in that because now when you look in the mirror, you hear their voice. And you hear them saying that about you, speaking that about you. Paul says you have to retrain your mind. The only way you're going to be transformed is by the renewing of your mind. And so I know I don't do all the feel-good, stuff. I know some guys, they preach, they smile a lot, feel good. Not knocking that. But there are truths in Scripture that we all need to be reading. We need to know that if you are a believer and you're following Christ, you are a child of the Son of God. You need to know that He sent His Son to die for you exactly where you were. So I don't care what you were out doing last night. I don't care what you did last year, what you did 10 years ago. When Jesus died for you, He knew exactly what you were going to do. And He still died for you. And let's face it, God's different. Because if something's wrong with my son, what do I want to happen? I want to take that sickness from him and put it on me. But God said, I love you so much that I'm going to send my son to die for you. He didn't say, hey, you have to put up with it yourself. He didn't say, hey, you have to deal with it. He said, no, I'm going to send my son. I'm going to take everything that you ever can imagine, and I'm going to put it on him. You talk about feeling some pain and embracing that. So if you will, just every head bowed, no one looking around. Just going to finish out. Just have a few things to kind of mull over and have us think about. Maybe you are that parent and you have some discipline problems and you just can't get it right. Hey, you're not a bad parent. We're all learning. We're all in progress. Maybe you need to end speaking those things about yourself. Maybe you need to ask for wisdom. Maybe you need to face the reality when you receive that wisdom, because sometimes it's not fun and it's not favorable. But then you need to know that, hey, maybe I do need to end something I've been doing and try something new. Maybe you've been in 50,000 relationships and they all end the same way, because all of those people got issues and you're good. Maybe you need to ask some wisdom. Maybe there is that person out there for you, because maybe you can get to that next step. But it's happened so many times to you that you just don't think it can happen now, and you're starting to define yourself by situations. Ask for wisdom. Face the reality. Maybe there's some things you need to change. Maybe your expectations of others are unrealistic. And then know that endings are good. Know that endings are okay. Maybe you've tried church, you've tried Jesus, You've tried all that 1,000 times. And every time you've gotten burnt, every time somebody's treated you the wrong way, every time somebody has said something negative to you, hey, I'm not discounting that. I know it can be rough going to a new church, checking out churches, hanging out with church people. But what if God has something that He's trying to set you up for? What if you continue to ask Him for wisdom? What if you face the reality that maybe this is a good church for you, or maybe that church is a good church for you? And what if you know that, hey, you know what, I may need to end what I've been putting up with. I may need to end another church I've been going to and partner myself with this church or that church. Because as representatives of Christ, we get it wrong a lot. And it's not realistic for us to expect from people to be Jesus, because there was only one Jesus. And so, wherever you are on the journey, maybe you're here today and you've never began that relationship with Christ. You've never started walking with Him. You've never taken that next step. Can I encourage you to end something today? End walking alone. End being by yourself. End trying to do things all on your own. Embrace Jesus as your forgiver and leader and begin walking that journey. I can't tell you what's going to happen tomorrow. No one can. But I know this, you won't have to walk alone anymore. You won't have to be alone. You won't have to do life alone. All of those things that happened to you in the past, all those things that you participated in, all those things that you did, He says you're forgiven. He doesn't hold that against you. People may, but Jesus did not. And maybe you're here today and you say, I have embraced Jesus as my forgiver and leader. I am walking with Him, but I've never been baptized. I want to encourage you to take that next step. Or maybe you're here and you've been coming for a while, and your next step needs to be that you need to partner with Story Church. You've been coming for a while and you know, hey, this is where I want to be a partner. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I've been to a lot of churches and I've been treated this way and that way. You never know till you start. I can tell you this, we are a church of a bunch of unperfect people. We will let you down. We will disappoint you. We will cause problems. It's what we do. We're people. So now that we know that and we're all straight, let's take the next step. Maybe you're here today and your next step may be that you've never given to God. He gives all these things to you. He gives all these resources to you, but you've never taken that next step to give something back to Him. I want to encourage you, wherever you are on the journey, to take that step. You know, we say this all the time, you're never more like Jesus than when you're serving. Because Jesus said, I come to serve, not be served. You're never more like God than when you're giving, because He gave His Son. So maybe today you need to take that next step. You need to begin serving. Growth Track is at 12 o'clock. Encourage you, when we're done with this service, leave, go get you something to eat, come back, hang out with us in Growth Track, and take that next step. There's always a next step regardless of where you are on the journey. As we end today, I'm going to pray, and then when we're done, you have a connection card in your seat. If you're making a decision today, if you're taking a next step today, I would encourage you to fill that out. We want to be able to follow up with you. We want to be able to walk with you on that next step. Because no one, doesn't matter what you've been through, where you are today, no one at Story Church walks alone. We walk with you. And hey, we're not perfect. We're going to mess stuff up. We're going to hurt your feelings. Now that that's out of the way, let's take the next step. God, we thank you right now. God, that you sent your Son to die for us. And God, if we can remap our minds to understand that and realize that there are endings that need to happen and there are endings that are necessary, and God, that if we'll just ask you for wisdom and then face the reality of the answers that we get, and God, know that endings are good, God, we can walk in freedom. God, Jesus said, I have come so that they may have life and have it full. God, you want us to walk free. So God, wherever we are on the journey today, God, I pray that you would walk with us to take that next step. God, if someone is in here, God, and they're hearing my voice, God, they're listening, and they have never embraced you as their forgiver and leader, God, would you give them the courage to take that next step? Or maybe someone's here and they need to call Story Church home. God, would you help them take that next step? God, maybe they need to start serving. Maybe they need to give back to you what you've already given to them. God, wherever they are, wherever we are, God, help us take a next step. And we thank you for the recognition that Story Church has gotten because we've served you and we've been a light and we've been salt in our community. God, may you continue to get all the honor and glory for that. God, may our influence in the community increase this year. God, may more people be served because of our generosity. May more lives be changed because of our serving willingness. And we thank you for this day. We thank you for your word. Pray that everything that we do this week would honor and glorify you. And God, that other people would see your love and want to know more about you. It's in Jesus' name, amen. Thank you so much, Story Church. I hope you've enjoyed today. I know today has been a great message. I really enjoyed it. I know that it's tough. Next week, I encourage you to come back as we finish out the end. It'll be the end to the end. And it's going to be awesome because we've wrestled through a lot of things, and how do we do endings? How do we do them well? We're going to look at that next week. Also next week, growth track. You want to get more involved. You want to get plugged in. You want to build relationships. Story groups is a place for you. And so next Sunday, right after service, we're going to have group link. You'll be able to sign up. We're actually going to have some different booths and appetizers and food, because if you don't know it yet, we can do food around here. Because if I'm involved, there's going to be food. I'm just throwing it out there. And so we're going to have food and all kinds of things. And so we will put the groups up on the website this week. So I want to encourage you to go to the website sometime this week, check them out, kind of look at what we're doing, what you want to do, where you can fit your schedule in, and encourage you to take that next step and get involved. And like I mentioned, today, Growth Track is at 12 o'clock. You've been coming for a while. You want to take that next step. You want to start serving. I would encourage you to come back at 12. We'll have a great experience for you, and you kind of learn why and what we do, and how you can be a part of bringing home a plaque next year. Boom! I'm just saying, just throwing it out there. All right, if you will, stand up. We'll be dismissed. Remember, if you partner with Story Church and you bring your tithes and offerings, please give on your way out. If you did not come prepared to do that, you may do so online. And remember, if you're a VIP, pick up your T-shirt and Frisbee on your way out. Thank you, Story Church. Love you. Have an awesome week.